Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. We're going to head to the Big Ten Conference, do a preview there. Before we get to that one, Preston, you've got the sports Cheetah guide out for college football, and you've done this the last several years, and it's been great stuff with your projections as far as conference winners, giving a lot of hedge opportunities, getting to the championship games and that. Tell our listeners and viewers what you've got on tap this year in the Cheetah Guide.
Sure, it's similar but a little bit different. We have all the charts and numbers and projections and power ratings for all the teams, and that'll be in the guide or the PDF. The actual breakdowns and the plays are separately at this Podcast U site that I've started. You can go to my Twitter handle and check that out. But I did the breakdowns in a more efficient fashion this year. I just speaking on audio clips for each team. And so it's gone pretty well, but yeah, we still have a bunch of plays in that going on. But I think a lot of people use the Cheetah Guide just essentially to have some numbers going into the season for their own handicapping week to week. And it's a good place to start, or at least, compare your numbers to if you've done the work yourself. And so some people like it just for that, and it's good to snag when you can.
Good stuff. In talking Big Ten, got to start with Ohio State, of course. Last year was supposed to be a rebuilding year for Ohio State, but as we say with these big programs, they don't rebuild, they just reload. And Ohio State, surprised a lot of people. We were high on them earlier in the season. I know, Ralph, you thought they were going to have a big year last year, and they went to the Final Four of the playoffs, but they got derailed by the national champion Clemson Tigers, who just rolled them in their playoff game. What was it, 31-0 last year? But they got everybody back pretty much this year. Are we looking at who's going to beat Ohio State here?
Well, before we get to that, I want to thank you for changing your busy schedule and missing Del Mar's opening day just to do videos today. We appreciate the dedication you have, so thank you.
Yeah.
Now back to football. The thing, I actually think there's value on Ohio State, and the reason is people think, they got crushed against Clemson and they only have 15 starters back. Well, they had 6 starters back last year. 6 starters, and then when you look at the game they lost in the regular season at Penn State, which changed Penn State's season, you got to remember Penn State was off a bye, and the week before Ohio State was at Wisconsin for an overtime game. I mean, that was my best bet of the week, was Penn State against Ohio State plus 19. So that upset wasn't crazy. Now everyone's talking about Penn State. Can they make the change? I don't think so. I think Penn State's a good team. I think they're the 3rd best team in the conference. I still have Michigan State rated higher. You look at
Michigan State or
Michigan, excuse
me.
You look at what Penn State did. They beat Ohio State, which turned their season around, and probably there would have been a coaching change had they lost that game because they would have been at 500. But Penn State's road wins were Purdue, Indiana, and Rutgers. They beat a very bad Michigan State team at the end, and granted, they looked good in the comeback against Wisconsin. So I think Ohio State is underrated in that side of the division. Penn State this year has to go to Ohio State, and Ohio State has the bye the week before Penn State, so I don't think that's even an issue. And I think Ohio State runs the table, and I think Penn State has a loss or two and finishes probably tied with Michigan in that 2nd or 3rd range on that side of the division.
Yeah, just to add in on Penn State, Preston, I like to look at the team's schedule and how it unfolds. Penn State has an absolutely horrible stretch of October where they play 3 out of 4 games on the road, and they got Ohio State and Michigan back-to-back. Ohio State on the road, Michigan at home. One, that Ohio State is sitting there waiting in revenge from last year's game, the way they lost it. And although Penn State might have a chip on their shoulder for the way they got blown out by Michigan, because that's basically what cost them their chance of playing for the national championship last year, because everybody said how bad that loss was. I just don't see them getting through that 4-week stretch. Preston, who do you like if there's anybody to upset Ohio State in this Big Ten?
There isn't, honestly, and I agree. The one futures bet I made in the conference is Ohio State to win it all at plus 125. I think in town it's more like minus 125, which I still think is fine in range. Going to like what Ralph was saying, they are undervalued just because you're getting another team up there that might contend in Penn State that I think we all are in agreement isn't there yet. And they have to play Ohio State on the road, which is going to come down to be, even if Penn State only lost 1 game all year, and it was that Ohio State one. Then Ohio State has like a free pass to lose one. They'll have the tiebreaker there in the division. I think they end the year at Michigan, right? Yeah. So they could lose that one and still be okay if they beat Penn State. So having home is massive. But what I was going to say is in the past, Ohio State's been like minus 180, minus 190 to win this conference, and now you can get plus money if you shop around. I think that's just a great bet. So I took that. I think 4 season win totals in the conference. Neither of them on Ohio State or Penn State, but some of the other schools that I think offered some value. But to win it at Ohio State, I think they're going to be 3+ touchdown favorites in like 7 of their games. The schedule sets up so perfectly, and off the bye, like you mentioned, at Penn State, I think it's a good bet, and I'd probably lay it up to the minus 150 range. I think there's value.
We've seen, granted, Ohio State's offense is going to be better with Wilson as the OC, the old Indiana head coach. Yeah. But you got to look at this defense. I mean, this is a legitimate top 2 or 3 defense. I mean, Clemson maybe have a better D-line, not really with the depth, but the starters. Alabama's defense is right there. But when you're going to hold teams to 1 touchdown, it doesn't take much to score to win a game.
The team that neither of you guys mentioned that I'm high on is in the other half is Wisconsin. That division is so soft for them, and you've got the 3 best teams that are going to battle one another in the other division with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. Michigan, I think, going to be better later in the season than at the beginning of the season, and we know they've got the season-ending game against Ohio State, which more than likely will decide who goes to the championship game. And I think that's where the advantage goes to Wisconsin, because Ohio State and Michigan's going to, bang heads together, and that's a huge revenge game for Michigan at the end of the season, because they had Ohio State beat last year, that entire game. I mean, for them, the way they ended up winning that game, that cost them their shot at the national championship. So if they get their revenge in that one and then play in the championship game the week later, that little advantage, I think, to Wisconsin, who's going to be sitting there, I think, unscathed, prettier, much easier schedule.
I'm going to throw out a long shot, and this team can go one of 2 ways, and it's Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, PJ Fleck's enthusiasm is contagious. Minnesota's had old coaches the last few years. I mean, the Kill experiment, and then Tracy Claeys, their OC, took over, and they just haven't had any young, enthusiastic head coaches. And PJ Fleck is that. Minnesota can open up 7-0. I mean, they have road games at Oregon State and Purdue, and then their toughest home game is Michigan State, which will be about close though, but it'll be close to pick 'em. So they really could go 7-0. Their last 5 games are at Iowa and Michigan, and then they have Nebraska and Wisconsin at home. Those are their final 2 home games. So this team is going to go one of 2 ways. It's going to be TCU. They're going to go 7-0, and they're going to go 0-5. We're going to fade them. Or if they get some magic, I mean, they're going to have a young quarterback. They either got sophomore Denny Kraft or redshirt freshman Seth Green, so no experience at quarterback. But if they got a quarterback that can gel, they have that enthusiasm, you're 7-0, and then you pull that upset. With them having Wisconsin and Nebraska at home, I think they're worth a long shot to look at what they're going to do. Now, the negative side of that, when P.J. Fleck took over at Western Michigan, he went 1-11. He just played his own guys. He didn't care about the first year. He wanted to build a system. So that's a negative to picking this as a long shot. But he's grown. He's got better talent. He's got a lot of his Western Michigan guys that came over that were pretty high recruits that transferred over to this team. So as a long shot, I like him.
All right, good stuff, guys. Hey, don't forget, each and every Tuesday at Wager Talk, it's $2 Tuesday. We pick one capper, and we give his best bet away for $2. It's a great way to introduce yourself to a new capper or just introduce yourself to the site. Check it out each and every Tuesday, $2 Tuesday at Wager Talk. We'll be back next week with more videos as we continue to preview college football and get you ready for the upcoming NFL season. Have a good week. See you next week.